I was someone once. Someone that mattered. Someone who stood tall above everyone else. I'm a veteran, for God's sake. I served 4 years in the U.S. military, fighting in the jungle rather than in the sandbox. Now, I'm nothing. Trash on the street and dirt under your nails. I still remember the day God turned on me. That furiously righteous day when I was broken down, both physically and mentally, by a God who I'd have previously sworn was loving, caring even. A God whom once treasured me as if I was the only person he'd ever created. After the war, I don't remember much about my homecoming. I knew that veterans such as myself received mixed feelings about their return. Some spat at us. Some greeted us with open arms. But that's not the part that I remember that well. What I do remember, vividly, was the day that he found me. He took me from my home. He held me tight and made me feel warm beneath my hardened exterior. I'd never felt such immense adoration from anyone on Earth, let alone a cosmic giant with the face of a young human. He walked alongside 2 larger giants, one male, one female, as he held me in his hands, beaming with joy. His smile was enough to melt away my unease, to make me almost forget that I had just been scooped up into the sky by, well, a god. He just looked so excited to have me, and it made me excited to have him, grateful I'd even say. When we arrived in his realm, he carried me to his chambers. Within, I was thrilled to find more people, soldiers, such as myself, warriors from all eras of mankind. I truly believed that I had been brought to divine paradise designed for those who gave their life in battle. My God stood me amongst these fallen comrades, and they greeted me as though they believed the same thing I did. This was our afterlife. I made friends with these men. Unsurprisingly, we all had a lot in common. We all had our reasons for fighting, and we all laid down our lives for our countries and empires. Our God visited us daily, slept in the same room as us, watched us, handled us, gave us voices and power, took care of us, in a way that no mere mortal could ever comprehend. I liked our afterlife. I felt at peace with my brothers. Some nights, our God would take a select handful of us and allow us to sleep in his own bed, a feat we all deemed as righteous. I myself had been chosen for this occasion one night. It was cleansing. The next day, I awoke feeling as though my soul had been refreshed, and it blazed with devotion. This is how things were for a while, back when I still had my dignity, back when I still had my real body. After about a century, our loving God seemed to slowly turn his back on us. He'd visit us less and less. His presence dwindled, and his appearance grew more ancient. A stubbled mustache began to sprout above his upper lip, and craters began forming atop his previously flawless face. He grew in stature, and his chambers began to change. He began pinning photos of false gods throughout his chamber. I found it odd that he seemed to worship these beings, but I knew not to question divinity. However, it reached a point where he wouldn't even acknowledge us. He pretended as though we weren't there, and thus began the Dark Ages. We grew quiet, resentful, but most of all, we couldn't shake the feeling of being forsaken. There were whispers amongst the soldiers, whispers of a coup. Many had given up the belief that our God was ever loving. We felt like playthings, as though our only purpose was to provide entertainment for this bored cosmic being. It was all futile. They had planned the attack. They had discussed plans for the aftermath. Everything had been laid out as clear as could be, and even I myself grew weary of the changing times and impending battle. But we mistook our God's silence for lack of power. He must have heard the whispers. He must have felt the growing rebellion in our hearts. We also mistook his silence for lack of love. It was clear, that day, that his love for us still burned bright. We had been conversing from our respective territories within the chamber, when all of a sudden, the door flew open with a thunderous boom. What stepped forward was not our God. It was another God entirely. And this God, he raged with the intensity of a hurricane as he blew through the chamber. He ripped the pictures off the wall. He knocked our God's possessions to the floor as we watched in abstract terror. He spoke angrily, in a voice that we recognized. A voice that we had heard echo throughout the realm countless times. The counter to our loving God. For the first time since my arrival, I began getting flashbacks to my time in the war, and I believe I can say the same for my brothers. whom trembled at my side. Our God cried in the doorway, weeping loudly as this new being tore his previously organized room apart. After ripping the sheets from our God's sleeping quarters, the new God then turned his attention to us. He smiled maliciously as he inched towards me and my comrades. As we stood frozen in place, he reached up and plucked Prince Adam from his spot on our platform. He held him by his sword, and Adam refused to let go, refused to be humiliated. With one twitch of his fingers, the evil god tore Adam's arm from his socket, leading to a scream that shouldn't exist in Valhalla. This caused our God to break, and he rushed the evil being, attempting to retrieve Adam from his grasp. The evil god simply shoved our God to the ground, laughing in his face as he continued his rampage. Our God cursed him in a language that I could not understand, but there were 6 words that I could make out as clear as day. Words that were seen as blasphemous within our ranks on earth. I wish you weren't my brother. The evil god shrugged this off and returned to torturing Adam. He grasped with all his might, but the god simply snapped the sword from his hand, tossing it to the ground and discarding it. Piece by piece he tore Adam apart, throwing his limbs across the room like a wild animal. Adam's screams continued, long after he had been picked apart, and it completely destroyed the rest of us. Our God sat on the ground, timid and trembling. He was not divine. He was not powerful. He was afraid. He was grief-stricken. Once Adam had been discarded, the God's attention was then turned to the rest of us. One by one, he grabbed us, and we faced the same fate as Adam. One by one, I had to watch my brothers be destroyed, dissected, disposed of. The snapping of their limbs made me flinch repeatedly, nauseating me though I hadn't eaten since my arrival. He finally landed upon me, and I had a quiet moment of peace within the chaos when I saw that my God seemed to rage, 10x harder than he had when this being had taken my brothers. He wanted me alive. He wanted no harm brought to me. However, that peace diminished when my God continued to do nothing, continued to wallow in his own pity. Like a coward, I stared the evil God in the eye, and with the ferocity of a warrior, I roared. I roared until my voice was strained, until I could not roar anymore, and I accepted my fate. The God's attention tore my head off, and I felt every ounce of the pain. I could not die. I was already dead. And even with my head removed, I still felt everything as he ripped my arms and legs off one by one. When he finished with me, he didn't even take a second look. He simply stepped over my crying God and exited the chamber, slamming the door behind him. My brothers wailed in anguish around me, begging for death. Instead, after what felt like months, my God picked himself up and began collecting their scattered remains. He tossed them in the trash. Our once loving God was now discarding us just as people had done in our life. Their wails and groans grew muffled as they were stuffed into the trash, and I felt tears attempting to break free from their ducts. I was eventually left alone as my God carried my fallen brothers elsewhere. I could see my own legs across the chamber, my arms, my torso, things that no man should ever have to see, and I cursed my God. I cursed him for abandoning us, cursed him for allowing such carnage to take place in his own realm. He was no God. In the midst of my growing resentment, the chamber door opened once more and the God stepped back inside, wiping fresh tears from his eyes. Solemnly, he collected my body parts while I screamed at him to leave me be. My cries were ignored, and instead, he placed me on what I assume was his duty desk. He placed all of my limbs together and left the chamber once more. He returned quickly, holding a mysterious device. He sat before me at his duty desk, and using the device, he began to solder my limbs to my body, delicately and slowly. The heat was torturous. My entire body felt as though it were being burned to a crisp, but before I knew it, I had my arms and legs back. He leaned back in his throne, admiring his craftsmanship, before soldering my head back onto my neck. When he finished, he stared at me, proudly, lovingly, but I hated him. I had felt the hatred growing in me from the moment the evil God entered his room. Better yet, from the moment he began to abandon us. And now, that hatred was at a boiling point. I had lost my brothers. I had seen things that I should have never been forced to see. And now, here he was, staring at me with the same love he had on the day of my arrival, as though nothing had happened. He left me on that duty desk. He doesn't acknowledge me anymore. He doesn't even seem the least bit remorseful about my fallen brothers. Instead, I'm just his decoration, his desk ornament, his broken toy. My girlfriend had a spa day. She didn't come back the same. I thought I was being nice, being the perfect boyfriend who recognized when his partner needed a day of relaxation and pampering. It was a mistake, all of it. and I possess full ownership of that decision. She'd just been so stressed from work. She's in retail, and because of the holidays, the higher-ups had her on deck 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. She complained to me daily about her aching feet and tired brain. And from the moment she uttered her first distress call, the idea hatched in my head. How great would it be, right? The perfect gift. I didn't want to just throw out some generic $20 gift card for some foot soaking in warm water. I wanted to make sure she got a fully exclusive experience. I scoured the internet for a bit. For the first 30 minutes or so, all I could find were cheap, sketchy-looking parlors that I felt my girlfriend had no business with. After some time, however, I found it. Surin Tide, the banner read. Beneath the logo and company photos, they had plastered a long-winded narrative in crisp white, lettering over a seductively black backdrop. It is our belief that all stress and aches are brought on by darkness held within, the soul and mind of a previously pure vessel. We here at Surin Tide uphold our beliefs to the highest degree and can assure that you will leave our location with a newfound sense of life and liberty. Our professional team of employees will see to it that not only do you leave happy, you leave satisfied. My eyes left the last word, and the only thing I could think was, wow, I really hope this isn't some kind of happy ending thing. With that thought in mind, I perused the website a bit more. Everything looked to be professional. No signs of criminal activity whatsoever. What did seem criminal to me, however, was the fact that for the full premium package, my pockets would become about $450 lighter. But hey, in my silly little boyfriend mind, as she once called it, expensive are best. I called the number linked on the website, and a stern-spoken female voice picked up. Surin Tide, where we de-stress best, how can I help you? Yeah, hi. I was just calling about your guys' premium package. There was a pause on the other end while the woman typed on her keyboard. Ah, yes. Donovan, I presume? I see you visited our site recently. Did you have questions about pricing? Would you like to book an appointment? Yes, I would, and... Wait, did you say Donovan? I was genuinely taken aback by this. It was so casual, so blandly stated. It nearly slipped by me for a moment. Yes, sir. As I said, we noticed you visited our website earlier. We try our best to attract new customers here. Right, so you just... The woman cut me off. Elegantly, though. Almost as if she knew what I had to say wasn't important enough for her time. Did you have a specific time and day in mind for your appointment? Yes, actually. This appointment is for my girlfriend. Let me just check what days she has available. I quickly checked my girlfriend's work calendar, scanning for any off days. As if she saw what I was doing, the woman spoke again. Oh, I will inform you. We are open on Christmas Day. Perfect. Really? That's perfect. Let's do, how about 7 p.m. Christmas Day then? I could hear her click-clacking away at her keyboard again. All right, 7 p.m. Christmas it is then. My girlfriend suddenly burst through my bedroom door, sobbing about her day at work. Out of sheer instinct, I hung up the phone and hurried to comfort her. She was on the brink. I could tell that her days in retail were numbered. I hate it there. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it, she pouted as she fought to remove her heels. Pulling her close for a hug and petting her head, all I could think to say was, I know, honey. You don't have to stay much longer. I promise we'll find you a new job. Promise? She replied, eyes wet with tears. Yes, dear. I promise. I felt a light in my heart glow warmer as my beautiful girl pulled me in tighter, burying her face in my chest. She was going to love her gift. Better than that, she needed her gift. We spent the rest of that night cuddled up in bed, watching her favorite show and indulging in some extra buttered popcorn. We had only gotten through maybe half an episode of Mindhunter before she began to snore quietly in my lap. My poor girl was beyond exhausted, and I could tell that she was sleeping hard, by the way. Her body twitched slightly as her breathing grew deeper and deeper. I gave it about 5 or 10 minutes before I decided to move and let her sleep while I got some work done. Sitting down at my computer, the first thing I noticed was the email. A digital receipt from the spa. I found this odd because I had never given them any of my banking information. Checking my account, I found that I was down $481.50. This irritated me slightly. Yes, I had every intention of buying the package. However, nothing was fully agreed upon. I redialed the number, and instead of the stern voice of the woman from earlier, I was greeted by the harsh sound of the dial tone. I had been scammed, or so I thought. I went back to bed with my girlfriend after trying the number 3 more times, resulting in the same outcome each time. Sleep took a while, but eventually reached my seething, overthinking brain. I must have been sleeping like a boulder, because when I awoke the next morning, my girlfriend was gone, with a note on her pillow that read, "Got called into work, see you soon," punctuated with a heart and a smiley face. Normally, this would have cleared things up immediately. However, Christmas was my favorite holiday, and I knew what day it was. Her store was closed, and there was no way she would have gone in on Christmas anyway. Her store was closed, and there was no way she would have gone in on Christmas anyway. I felt panic settle in my chest as I launched out of bed and sprinted for the living room. Once there, I found it completely untouched, despite the numerous gifts under our tree. This was a shocking and horrifying realization for me once. I learned that our front door had been kicked in, leaving the door handle hanging from its socket. My heart beat out of my chest as I dialed 911 as fast as my thumbs would allow, despite the fact that my door had clearly been broken and now my girlfriend was gone. The police told me that there was nothing they could do. My girlfriend and I were both adults, and it would take at least 48 hours before any kind of search party could be considered. I hadn't even begun to think about Sure-and-Tide being responsible until I received a notification on my phone, an automated reminder that simply read, "Don't forget, spa appointment. Dol 25 7 p.m. EST. Those motherfuckers. With the urgency of a heart surgeon, I returned to my computer, ready to take photos of every inch of their company website to forward to the police. Imagine my dismay when I was forced into the tragic reality that the link was now dead, and all that I could find was a gray 404 page and an error sign. Those next 24 hours were like the universe's cruel idea of a joke. The silence, the decorated home that should have been filled with cheer and joy but was instead filled with gloom and dread. And yeah, obviously I tried explaining my situation to the police again. They don't believe the young, I suppose. Told me she probably just got tired of me and went out for fresh air. Told me to try and enjoy the holidays. Threw salt directly into my wounds. By December 26th, I was going on 18 hours without sleep. The police had hesitantly become involved in the case, and my house was being ransacked for evidence by a team of officers. They didn't seem like they wanted to help. They seemed like they wanted to get revenge on me for interrupting their festivities. They had opened every single Christmas gift, rummaged through every drawer and cabinet. I could swear on a Bible that one of them even took some of my snacks, as well as a soda from my fridge. I was too tired to argue against them. Instead, I handed over my laptop and gave them permission to go through my history and emails. I bid them goodbye and sarcastically thanked them for all of their help. Once the last officer was out my door, I climbed the stairs to my bedroom and collapsed face first into a pillow, crying gently and slipping into slumber. I was awoken abruptly by the sound of pounding coming from my front door. I rolled out of bed groggily and wiped the sleep from my eyes as I slowly walked towards the sound. As I approached, the knocking ceased suddenly, and I heard footsteps rushing off my front porch. Checking the peephole, all I could see was a solid black van with donut tires and tinted windows burn rubber down my driveway. Opening my door, my fury and grief transformed into pure, unbridled sorrow as my eyes fell upon what they couldn't see from the peephole. In a wheelchair sat before me, dressed in a white robe with a towel still wrapped around her hair, my beautiful girlfriend. She didn't look hurt per se. She looked empty. Her eyes were glazed and glassy, and her mouth hung open as if she didn't have the capacity to close it. Her skin had never looked more beautiful. Blackheads, blemishes, every imperfection had been removed. When I say every imperfection, please believe those words. Even her birthmark had completely disappeared. The one that used to kiss her collar and cradle her neck. God's proof of authenticity, we used to call it. In fact, the only distinguishable mark I could find on her body was a bandage, slightly stained with blood, that covered her forehead. I fought back tears as I reached down to stroke her face. Her eyes slowly rolled towards me before her gaze shifted back into space. I called out her name once, twice, 3 times before she turned her head back in my direction. By this point, I was screaming her name, begging her to respond to me, to which she replied with scattered grunts and heavy breathing. I began shaking her wheelchair, sobbing as I pleaded for her to come back. Her eyes remained distant and hollow. However, as I shook the chair, something that I hadn't noticed previously fell out of her robe. A laminated card with the ST logo plastered boldly across the top. I bent down to retrieve the card, my heart and mind shattering with each passing moment, and what I read finally pushed me over the edge. Session complete. Thank you for choosing Surin Tide, and happy holidays from our family to yours.